Hey guys, welcome back to the Freeman Motorsports channel. I'm your host, Jack Freeman, here with you guys again today. Today we've got a ton of NASCAR storylines to tell you guys about. A ton of guys, or a ton of drivers ending up on new teams, sponsors returning. Some things are still rumored, but pretty much everything I'm going to be talking about today is confirmed. Bubba has a returning sponsor from his Xfinity Series days. Harvick had some of his paint schemes leaked. Matty D finally gets his 2022 ride set up. Preece is going to SHR, switching manufacturers for the third time in his career. Sage Karam, an IndyCar guy, goes to Alpha Prime Racing with Tommy Joe Martins, and Josh Bilicki, is rumored to go from Rickrow Racing to Spire. Okay, so now let's start off with Bubba Wallace. He's going to be sponsored by, I believe it's pronounced Lidos. I'll try and get a picture of the paint scheme that they've announced. Uh, I believe it'll be at Coda, and I believe a handful more races, kind of like in that same time frame. Uh, and this car looks pretty nice. It's cool to see a sponsor returning to the sport after leaving. To be honest, I don't know anything about Lidos or what the company does, but the paint scheme looks pretty cool. It kind of reminds me of Daniel Suarez Camo Scope. I don't know if that's around, but the one paint scheme he had last year that was kind of like black, but also had a ton of colors on the side of it. The only thing is I saw just the number on that car looks really, really pinched down. That was my only pet peeve with that paint scheme. And then the next thing we'll talk about is Kevin Harvick had two of his primary paint schemes leaked that he'll be running in the 2022 season. I'll try and get a picture of those up on the screen now real quick if I can. You've got the Busch scheme, which looks somewhat similar to his past schemes. I hope that Busch runs a couple different schemes this year, kind of like how they've done the past couple years they've been in the sport. I think honestly all of Busch's, not Kyle Busch's, Busch's the sponsor, all their various paint schemes have made I guess, have made the sport more entertaining to watch with so many like different cool looking cars on track. I have quite a few Kevin Harvick cars myself that are Busch cars just because they've got so many just different crazy designs from like the Gen Z car to like the one he had at the Brickyard 500 last year to that like National Forest Foundation one where they did a collab and it had like the mountains on the side of it. That was a beautiful car. And then the other one that was leaked was the Hunt Brothers Pizza car. And this car looks all right. It's pretty green. Um, to be honest, in my opinion, it's not that great, but it's not bad. But it's just pretty mediocre. I think they could have done a lot more. Also, this is another side note. Alex Bowman's, or not Alex, I think Alex Bowman, or maybe Chase Elliott's Lumar scheme for next year. I actually don't know what team they'll be with. I assume it'll be Chase because that's who they were with last year. They've been with Alex Bowman before, but it could be with essentially any of the Hendrick teams. But Lumar will announce their paint scheme for the 2022 season. I believe next or January the 13th. So that'll be interesting to keep your eyes out for. Honestly, in my opinion, in my personal opinion, the Lumar schemes are pretty bad. I just don't like the color patterns that they use or the colors that Lumar has as their branding, and it's just hard to make a good paint scheme out of those colors, in my opinion. But the next one we have, probably the biggest storyline in this video, is Matty D gets a ride for the 2022 season. It's not a Cup ride, it's not an Xfinity Series ride, but it's a truck ride with the 25. I don't what's the team called, like Rackley War or something like that. But this team's been around in the Truck Series for a couple years now. They've had drivers like Timothy Peters and others, and who else? Josh Berry ran a couple races for them last year. I think this is a pretty mediocre ride. They have an alliance with GMS Racing. I think Matty D is a lot more competent than a lot of the guys in the Truck Series right now, and I think he'll be able to kind of elevate that team to probably a playoff contending team, not necessarily a race winning team, or because that team kind of lacks raw pace. But I think he'll be able to get the results that a lot of other Truck Series drivers don't get because they kind of are still a bit inexperienced and drive a bit in over their head and make a lot of clumsy mistakes from time to time. So I think Matty D definitely could contend for a playoff seed in the Truck Series next year. I'm really going to be interested to follow that storyline. I think he'll do better than a lot of people are saying he will. I hear some people saying that he'll probably just be about a 10 to 15th place driver and occasionally get up into the top 5 or whatever. But I think he'll be in the top 10 the majority of the races he's in. I think definitely at the plate races in the Truck Series, they only have 2. But I think he'll definitely be trying to make the most of those opportunities, considering that he's a pretty decent plate racer himself. But the next big storyline, which is probably just as big as Matty D getting his ride locked up for next year, is Ryan Preece is going to SHR as kind of like a reserve driver, almost like they have in Formula One. He'll be making a couple select starts for the team next year in the Coke 600, another race, and I think maybe one more. And they're not going to be for Stewart-Haas, but they'll be with Stewart-Haas affiliated teams. So with, I assume, Rick Ware Racing, he'll probably make a couple starts for, because Rick Ware Racing now has an alliance with Stewart-Haas Racing. It'll be interesting to see how much that elevates Rick Ware Racing's equipment. But hey, that's good news to hear for Ryan Preece. He was out of a ride this offseason after JTG went down to one car for the 2022 season. It's a shame. Honestly, I said Ryan Preece has switched manufacturer camps 3 times. He was first at Toyota in the Xfinity Series, making some starts for Joe Gibbs. Then he went to JTG in the Cup Series with Chevy, and now he's going over to the Ford camp at Stewart-Haas Racing. Some people are saying that he's going to be the replacement driver for Kevin Harvick eventually if Harvick doesn't renew his contract at the end of the season. But personally, unless this year really flops for Harvick, I really don't see him retiring at the end of the year. I think he's honestly just got too much racer still in him, and I think Harvick could definitely be competitive for at least another 2 or 3 years. So I definitely see Harvick renewing his contract at the end of the year. That's just my personal opinion. And I also would like to say that he does have a handful more starts for Stewart-Haas Racing in the Xfinity Series, so he'll probably be driving the 00 at some point in the Xfinity Series, along with Riley Herbst in the 98. So we'll have to see how he does in those Xfinity Series starts. We want to make sure that, I guess Stewart-Haas wants to make sure that he performs well before they think about promoting him up to a Cup Series ride. And a lot of people are saying that he may replace Kevin Harvick. I honestly see him replacing more so somebody like Eric Almirola or Cole Custer if neither of those two guys perform very well again in 2022. He'll also be making a lot more Truck Series starts for David Gillen Racing. It'll be interesting to see how he does in those, considering that he won in one of his 2 starts last year in National. So I think he'll definitely be, I think if he ran full-time in the Truck Series, I think he would definitely be a threat for the championship. I'm honestly kind of wondering why he's not doing that. Maybe it's because DGR can't get another full-time car set up for him, but that's just, or he doesn't have the sponsorship, but that's just my thinking. And then another smaller storyline is Sage Karam is going to Alpha Prime Racing. Alpha Prime Racing is a new Xfinity Series team for the 2022 season. It is a collaboration between Tommy Joe Martins and Cesar Boscarella. These two guys have been, Tommy Joe Martins, most people probably know as a owner racer the past couple of years, but now he's going to be collaborating with Cesar Boscarella to have a 2-car team next year. At first it was supposed to be a 1-car team, but now they've announced 2 cars. Sage Karam will not be racing full-time, but I think he'll be racing at a couple of the road courses and maybe short tracks. I think Karam is definitely a pretty good talent for this team to pick up for a couple races this year, considering that he was a pretty solid IndyCar driver for his short stint in IndyCar. And in the handful of stock car races that he's been in, he has performed very well for the little experience he has. And then the last storyline for today's video is Josh Bilicki is rumored to go to Spire. I thought that Rick Ware Racing would return Josh Bilicki, but since Cody Ware is, I believe, going to be making a lot of starts in that team next year, and they're only going to have 2 cars next year, it's probably unlikely that they'll sign Josh Bilicki to a full-time year next year. Sorry, guys, just give me a minute. It'll probably be unlikely that they sign Josh Bilicki to a full-time car next year, just because they kind of like to cycle. I mean, you guys know how Rick Ware Racing is. They cycle so many drivers through their system with only having 2 cars, and one of them probably being designated for Cody next year. I don't see them returning Bilicki full-time. I think Bilicki wants to go full-time, especially after it's just the success he had last year with Rick Ware Racing full-time. He finished the best of any of the Rick Ware drivers in the standings, and he got their first top 10 for them, I believe, at Daytona. I may be mistaken. But it's rumored that he'll go to Spire. I think Bilicki, I think that's a Spire. If they do pick up Bilicki, I think it's a great pickup. It sounds weird. It feels like I'm talking about, like, I'm talking about guys switching teams, but it feels like I'm talking about some sort of, like, fantasy football league or something. But I think it'll be a great pickup for Spire. I think Bilicki is a really great personality. I think a lot of people, at least, I think he's one of the more liked underdog drivers. I think he has a ton of talent. I'm not really sure yet. We haven't really seen what he can do since he's been in sub-tier equipment with Rick Ware Racing in the past couple of years. But having Corey LaJoie and Josh Bilicki in the Spire house next year will be pretty good, considering that both of those guys are pretty well liked, and I think both of them make the most of their equipment and rarely get into mistakes or cause accidents, and I think that's exactly the recipe you need if you're a team looking to build, especially next year when you don't want to be wrecking a lot of cars, considering that there's probably going to be some sort of parts shortage, especially for the smaller teams next year. But that's all for this video, guys. I just wanted to say that if the audio quality is a bit rocky on this video, that I'm going to be trying to get a whole new setup before the Cup Series starts, the Cup Series season starts next month with the Clash, which is only 1 month away from today. I want you guys to be able to get the best experience you can when you're listening to my commentary to the Cup races and whatnot. And that will be starting with a new microphone, and then hopefully we'll get a new camera by the Busch Clash, or at least the Daytona 500. But yeah, I just want to let you guys know that. Also, if you want to check out my other channels, you can check out my diecast channel. There's a link below to that, as well as my reaction channel where I react to music. There's a link to that down below as well. Thank you guys for subscribing, or well, you should subscribe if you haven't already, but thank you to those who are already subscribed, and I'd appreciate it if you drop a like on this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. That's all for now. I'm out.